Right now, you are violently bleeding out on an invisible battlefield locked entirely inside your own skull. You hand your sanity to strangers and wonder why your soul feels hollowed out. But there is a ruthless, ancient cure to this self-imposed slaughterhouse. Dare to discover it. Have you ever felt the terrifying weight of your own mind at 2 in the morning? The room is pitch black, dead silent, save for the rhythmic, mocking hum of a ceiling fan and the violent thud of your own heart against your ribs. Your body is screaming for rest, begging for just one moment of peace after a bone-crushing day, but your brain is engulfed in a roaring inferno. You are paralyzed, held hostage by a ghost. Not a literal phantom, but something far more destructive. A careless remark from a coworker hours ago, a cold text from a lover, or the venomous, passing comment of a faceless stranger on the internet. You twist and turn, tearing yourself apart from the inside, agonizing over the razor-sharp comebacks you were too stunned to deliver. You are bleeding out on an invisible battlefield entirely of your own making, letting someone who does not even care you exist snatch away your sanity, your sleep, and your precious life force. If you have ever felt this suffocating weight and want to finally break free from the chains of your own mind, please hit the subscribe button to support our channel. Your subscription is the driving force that allows us to continue bringing you these life-changing psychological deep dives. Sovereign Mindset warmly welcomes you to a journey of reclaiming your absolute inner power. Let us stop for a fraction of a second and confront a brutal, humiliating truth. Why do we voluntarily hand over the remote control of our nervous system to people who mean absolutely nothing to us? There is a modern plague ravaging our society, a terminal illness of the soul that no hospital machine can detect, yet almost all of us are infected: emotional exhaustion. I know this because I have lived at the absolute bottom of that pitch-black abyss. This is not the satisfying, muscular ache that follows a 10-mile run or a day of hard, honest labor. Physical exhaustion is a blessing. It can be cured by a deep, dreamless sleep. Emotional exhaustion is a terrifyingly different beast. It is the sensation of waking up, opening your eyes, and realizing your chest is completely hollowed out. It is a profound, paralyzing lethargy where you have zero life force left to face the world. I remember the days when I bled my own spirit dry, diving headfirst into endless, toxic arguments just to prove I was right. I remember the blinding flashes of uncontrollable rage when reality dared to deviate from my expectations, only to be left standing in the smoking ruins of my relationships, consumed by a clawing, agonizing guilt. I fought vicious wars everywhere, against anyone who slightly displeased me, completely blind to the fact that the bloodiest, most devastating battlefield of all was locked exclusively inside my own skull. If we possess the raw courage to peel back the ugly layers of our chronic anger and dissatisfaction, what exactly do we find shivering beneath? We find a pathetically fragile ego. An ego constructed of razor-thin glass, desperately starving for the applause, validation, and worship of the outside world, while living in mortal terror of the slightest criticism. Because this ego is so agonizingly weak, it demands to be spoon-fed from external sources: a compliment, a nod of agreement, a fleeting moment of respect. The second that food supply is violently cut off or replaced by an insult, this fragile ego thrashes, screams, and rebels in sheer desperation. We delude ourselves into believing we are fiercely defending our honor, but the sick reality is that we have become absolute slaves to the unpredictable reactions of society. But there is a way out of this self-imposed slaughterhouse. When I was drowning in the darkest depths of my own mental exhaustion, suffocating under the weight of my reactions, I did not find salvation in cheap, toxic positivity slogans telling me to just smile and look on the bright side. I found a lifeline forged in the fires of antiquity, a relentless system of thought tested by battered slaves, bloodied gladiators, and the most supreme Roman emperors. I found Stoicism. Stoicism is not a collection of dry, dusty theories rotting on a university bookshelf, nor is it a manual on how to become a cold, unfeeling stone. Quite the opposite. It is the ultimate antidote. It is a soothing, warm balm poured directly over a mind that is frantically burning alive. It offers a supreme, uncompromising principle that drags us out of the suffocating mud of self-destruction, delivering a paradigm shift so profound that it permanently alters the very fabric of how we experience human existence. To truly understand this profound paradigm shift, we must first learn to draw a harsh, unforgiving line in the sand of our reality. The ancient Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, but to a mind that is drowning in exhaustion, I prefer to call it the ultimate surrender of the ego. For decades, I lived under the suffocating delusion that if I just worried enough, if I just planned meticulously enough, or if I argued passionately enough, I could somehow bend the fabric of the universe to my will. I believed I could control how my boss perceived my worth, how my partner interpreted my affection, or how strangers on the street judged my appearance. I was operating under a God complex, entirely convinced that my anxiety was a productive tool that kept the world spinning on its axis. But the reality was that I was a man standing on a beach, screaming at the tide to stop rising, and completely breaking my own heart when the water inevitably washed over my feet. This delusion of omnipotence is the very birthplace of our chronic emotional exhaustion. We pour gallons of our precious, finite life force into a black hole of things we cannot change, and then we have the audacity to wonder why we feel so hollowed out by sunset. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, a man who spent his early life in the brutal chains of literal slavery, understood freedom better than any billionaire or emperor living today. He stripped the human experience down to its barest, most agonizingly simple truth. There are things that are up to us, and there are things that are not. Your opinions, your impulses, your desires, and your aversions, these belong to you. They are your sovereign territory. Everything else, your body, your property, your reputation, the economy, the weather, the traffic, and the unpredictable, messy emotions of other human beings, are entirely outside of your jurisdiction. When I first collided with this concept, my fragile ego violently rebelled. It felt like defeat. It felt like giving up. But as I sat in the wreckage of my own failed attempts to micromanage the universe, a quiet, terrifying clarity began to wash over me. I realized that my emotional exhaustion was not caused by the cruelty of the world, but by my stubborn refusal to accept reality as it was. I was bleeding from the hands because I was gripping a rope that was attached to a runaway train, foolishly believing I could pull it backward. The moment you simply let go of the rope, the pain in your hands instantly ceases. You do not stop the train. The train of life will do whatever it is destined to do. But you stop destroying yourself in the process. Imagine the sheer, unadulterated relief of realizing that it is not your job to make someone understand you if they are committed to misunderstanding you. Imagine the weight lifting off your chest when you finally accept that a colleague's passive-aggressive email is a reflection of their own internal misery, not a testament to your incompetence. We exhaust ourselves trying to write the scripts for other people's lives, demanding they play the roles we assigned them, and then we collapse in a fit of rage when they inevitably go off script. To practice the dichotomy of control is to politely resign from the position of general manager of the universe. It is the conscious, daily act of retracting your energy from the external chaos and redirecting it entirely into your inner citadel. The next time you feel the familiar, sickening rise of panic or anger, force yourself to stop and ask one brutal question. Is this completely within my control? If the answer is no, you must learn to look at it with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a storm through a thick pane of glass. You acknowledge the lightning, you hear the thunder, but you absolutely refuse to step outside and let it strike you. This is not apathy. It is the highest form of self-preservation. Yet, knowing what we cannot control is only half the battle. The true war is fought in the fleeting, microscopic space where we decide how to respond. In the psychology of human behavior, there is a concept that acts as the ultimate bridge between being a mindless animal and a sovereign individual, the space between stimulus and response. When I was deeply infected with emotional exhaustion, I had no space. My life was a series of instantaneous, explosive reflexes. If you criticized me, I immediately struck back with venom. If a driver cut me off, I laid on the horn and bathed in acidic road rage. If my plans fell apart, I spiraled into an immediate, dark depression. I was not a human being acting upon the world. I was merely a puppet violently jerking on the strings of my environment. Every single external trigger bypassed my rational mind entirely and went straight to the fragile, bruised ego, demanding blood. This absolute lack of space is precisely what drains our spiritual battery to zero. We fail to realize that anger, resentment, and defensiveness are biologically expensive emotions. They flood our nervous system with cortisol, spike our heart rate, and literally burn through our metabolic energy. When you react instantaneously to every minor inconvenience, you are leaving your vault completely unlocked, allowing any passing stranger to reach in and steal your peace. A harsh word from a stranger is, in its purest physical form, nothing more than a vibration of air hitting your eardrums. That is all it is. But we take that meaningless vibration, pull it into our minds, weaponize it, and repeatedly stab ourselves with it. We do the attacker's job for them. The Stoics mastered what I now call the sacred pause. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, commanded legions and faced constant betrayals, yet he wrote in his private journals about the necessity of retreating into his own mind before acting. Cultivating this pause is the most incredibly difficult, yet profoundly rewarding work you will ever undertake. It requires you to act as a silent observer to your own biological impulses. The next time someone insults you or life throws a devastating wrench into your plans, I want you to feel the heat rising in your chest. Feel the desperate, clawing urge of your ego, wanting to scream, wanting to defend itself, wanting to fix the situation immediately. And then, I want you to do the most terrifying thing imaginable. Absolutely nothing. Breathe. Hold the silence. In that agonizingly quiet gap between the trigger and your reaction, you will find your absolute freedom. You will suddenly realize that you are not the anger. You are the awareness observing the anger. By simply waiting 3 seconds, the biological wave of emotion begins to crest and fall, and the rational mind steps back into the driver's seat. You begin to ask yourself, does this require my participation? Will my anger improve this situation, or will it just set me on fire to keep someone else warm? The sacred pause breaks the chains of emotional slavery. It transforms you from a fragile glass vase that shatters at the slightest touch into a deep, vast ocean. A rock thrown into a puddle creates a violent, muddy splash, completely disrupting the water. But a rock thrown into the middle of the ocean simply sinks quietly to the bottom, barely leaving a ripple on the surface. When you master the space between stimulus and response, you become the ocean. Once we conquer our immediate reactions and establish the boundaries of our control, we are faced with the ultimate, terrifying challenge. Not just tolerating the tragedies of life, but learning to embrace them. It is one thing to sit passively in a storm and tell yourself that you cannot control the rain. It is an entirely different, transcendent level of existence to step out into the downpour and wash the blood off your face with it. This is the fiery, uncompromising heart of Stoicism, encapsulated in the concept of Amor Fati, the love of fate. For most of my life, I existed in a constant, low-grade state of negotiation with reality. I believed that if I was a good person, if I worked hard, I somehow earned a cosmic free pass from suffering. When betrayal, failure, or loss inevitably struck, my immediate reaction was a piercing, agonizing cry of, "Why is this happening to me?" I viewed adversity as a cruel interruption to the life I was supposed to be living, an unfair penalty in a game I was trying so desperately to win. But fighting reality is the most exhausting, futile endeavor a human soul can undertake. Reality always wins, and it remains completely indifferent to your protests. Amor Fati demands a radical, almost unnatural psychological flip. It asks us to look at the wreckage of our plans, the sting of rejection, and the crushing weight of grief and say, "I did not choose this, but I will use this." The Stoics did not view obstacles as roadblocks on the path. They believed the obstacle was the path. When a massive roaring fire encounters a piece of wood, it does not weep because the wood is in its way. It consumes the wood, uses it as fuel, and burns brighter, hotter, and higher because of it. I remember the exact moment this realization struck me. I was sitting on the floor of an empty apartment, having just lost a career I had poured my entire identity into, and a relationship I thought was my anchor. I was emotionally bankrupt, entirely devoid of hope, waiting for someone to come and save me. But nobody came. In that devastating silence, I realized that I had a choice. I could spend the rest of my life playing the tragic victim, nursing my grievances, and letting the bitterness rot me from the inside out. Or I could become the fire. I could take the humiliation, the heartbreak, and the terror of the unknown, and I could throw them directly into the furnace of my own evolution. To practice Amor Fati is to stop wishing for an easier life and to start demanding a stronger version of yourself. It is the profound understanding that the universe is not conspiring against you. It is actively, relentlessly training you. Every person who breaks your heart is teaching you emotional independence. Every catastrophic failure is brutally stripping away your arrogance and leaving you with the quiet humility necessary for true greatness. When you adopt this mindset, emotional exhaustion evaporates because nothing can drain you anymore. Every drop of poison the world hands you is immediately transmuted into medicine. You become psychologically invincible, not because you never fall, but because you have learned how to fall so beautifully that it looks like flying. You no longer dread the unpredictable storms of the future because you know with absolute, terrifying certainty that whatever comes, you will use it. This relentless alchemy of turning pain into power inevitably leads us to the final, most glorious destination of the human experience: true inner sovereignty. Let us return for a moment to that pitch-black bedroom at 2 a.m. The ceiling fan is still spinning. The house is still dead silent. But you are no longer a hostage. You are lying in the dark. But the roaring inferno in your mind has been extinguished, replaced by a cool, unshakable stillness. The ghosts of the past, the careless remarks of coworkers, the cruel judgments of strangers, they still exist in the world, but they cannot cross the drawbridge into your fortress. You have finally realized that your peace is a sacred sanctuary, and you are the heavily armed guards standing at the gate. You no longer hand out the keys to your nervous system to anyone who asks. You have taken your power back from the world. This is the ultimate promise of the Stoic path. It is not about suppressing your emotions, turning into a robotic husk, or denying the deep, poetic beauty of human vulnerability. It is about emotional independence. It is the quiet confidence of knowing that while the external world may be a raging, unpredictable theater of madness, your internal world is an immaculate garden of your own design. You can walk through the chaotic streets of life, surrounded by anger, greed, and despair, and remain entirely untouched by it. You no longer need the applause of the crowd to feel valuable, which means you no longer fear their boos. You are no longer starving for validation, because you have finally learned how to feed yourself. Reaching this level of sovereignty is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong, daily practice. It is a muscle that must be torn and rebuilt time and time again. There will still be days when the ego flares up, when a sharp comment stings, or when the sheer weight of existence threatens to pull you under. But the difference is that you now have the tools to pull yourself out of the abyss. You recognize the emotional exhaustion not as a permanent state, but as a temporary visitor, a gentle reminder that you have briefly stepped outside of your circle of control. You simply take a deep breath, invoke the sacred pause, and step back into your power. As we conclude this journey into the depths of the human mind, I urge you to look closely at the invisible chains you have placed upon yourself. Look at the people and the circumstances you have allowed to drain your life force. Forgive them, not because they necessarily deserve it, but because you absolutely deserve peace. Release your desperate grip on the illusion of control, embrace the brutal, magnificent reality of your fate, and claim your sovereign mind. The world is loud, chaotic, and endlessly demanding, but inside you lies a quiet, untouchable absolute. Guard it with your life, nurture it with your awareness, and when you close your eyes tonight, let the silence of the room be a reflection of the deep, unbreakable silence within your own soul. You are finally, truly awake, and for the first time in a very long time, you are free to rest. True emotional freedom begins at the exact moment we stop demanding the universe bend to our will and instead surrender to the stark reality of the dichotomy of control. We exhaust ourselves by bleeding over battles we were never meant to fight, trying to dictate other people's perceptions, the unpredictability of the future, and the chaos of the external world. By relinquishing the heavy, self-imposed burden of playing general manager of the universe, we immediately reclaim our finite energy. This reclamation is forged in the sacred pause, the fleeting but immensely powerful space between a stimulus and our reaction. By holding our silence and observing our biological impulses rather than blindly acting upon them, we disarm the external triggers that once drained us. Furthermore, this journey transcends mere tolerance through the profound alchemy of Amor Fati. It requires a conscious decision to stop negotiating with reality and start using every tragedy, rejection, and failure as direct fuel for our own evolution. When the obstacle becomes the path, the world can no longer diminish us. It only makes us stronger. Ultimately, practicing this radical acceptance and diligently guarding our inner citadel leads to a sovereign mind. We are no longer held hostage by the judgments of others or the cruel unpredictability of life. Instead, we cultivate an unbreakable inner stillness, transforming ourselves from fragile, easily shattered vessels into vast, unshakable oceans. This is the ultimate promise of the Stoic path. Not the absolute absence of external storms, but the unwavering presence of an immaculate, self-directed peace within. Your chronic emotional exhaustion is not a byproduct of a cruel, demanding world, but the direct result of your ego trying to micromanage a reality it simply cannot control. True power is not about manipulating your environment or forcing others to conform to your expectations. It is the absolute mastery of your own internal responses. When you stop weaponizing external events against yourself and start actively transmuting them into fuel for your own growth, you become psychologically invincible. Audit your jurisdiction. Whenever you feel anxiety or anger rising, a looming layoff, a partner's bad mood, a rude email, immediately ask yourself, is this completely within my control? If the answer is no, consciously categorize it as external noise. Retract your energy and aggressively redirect it into the things you can control: your preparation, your perspective, and your work ethic. Enforce the 3-second rule. The next time you are insulted, cut off in traffic, or experience a sudden change of plans, completely freeze for 3 seconds. Take a deep breath. Let the biological wave of cortisol spike and begin to fall. Observe your urge to react, but do not give in to it. Use this sacred pause to step back into the driver's seat and choose a rational response over a destructive reflex. Transmute the poison. When faced with a sudden setback, permanently banish the victim mentality of, "Why is this happening to me?" and immediately replace it with, "How can I use this?" Treat a difficult colleague as a free personal trainer for your patience. Treat a painful failure as a mandatory masterclass in humility and resilience. What is one specific thing in your life right now that you have been trying to control, but realize you need to finally let go of? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below so we can all reflect, learn, and grow from each other's perspectives. If you found value in this content, please subscribe to the channel to support our work. It gives us the motivation to keep creating more deep, impactful videos for you.